Hello, and welcome to the AISL Awardee meeting on Grant and Fiscal Management. I am Cartia Brown-Morgan, a Grant Management Specialist in the Division of Grants and Agreements, also known as DGA. In DGA, we are involved from pre-award to closeout. As a Grant Management Specialist, I have award authority to issue awards on behalf of the Foundation, and my approval constitutes a legal obligation of federal funds for awardees to expend and to fulfill the scope of the approved proposal. I am also responsible for issuing award amendments in certain post-award prior approvals, for monitoring awardee compliance with award terms and conditions, and for the administration and closeout of awards. These are the topics that I'm going to cover today. Throughout the presentation, I may say a key thing to remember or provide examples. Please make a note as I believe these items may help you with your future NSF award. Okay, let's get started. Award administration roles. Key thing to remember as the PI, if you have any technical or scientific questions, please contact your NSF program officer. If you ever have any questions regarding administrative or budgetary issues, please contact your institution's sponsored research office. Award notification. A key thing to remember is to read your award letter. I repeat, read your award letter. Please make sure that you have a copy of the award letter along with the sponsored research office. The award letter and any action submitted through FastLane can be viewed in FastLane. Participant support. Funds provided for participant support may not be diverted by the awardee to other categories of expense without the prior approval of the cognizant NSF program officer. Since participant support costs is not a normal account classification, the awardee organization must be able to separately identify participant support costs. It is highly recommended that separate accounts such as sub-accounts, subtasks, or subledgers be established to accumulate these costs. If you have participant support costs, your institution should have written policies and procedures to segregate participant support costs. A question I seem to get a lot is, how should a student employee be budgeted? The answer is, a student cannot be compensated partially as an employee and as a participant on the same grant. It is up to the proposing organization to determine whether they should be a student employee or a participant based on the role of the student in the project. Student employees are compensated for services rendered, and their level of compensation is tied to the number of hours worked. Participant support costs should be used to defray the costs of students participating in a conference or training activity related to the project. Incentive payments. Incentives are typically associated with ensuring participation in research studies. Incentive payments or gifts to participants must be made in accordance with written institutional policies and procedures and supported by auditable documentation. The allowability of these costs will ultimately be based on the awardee institution's ability to adequately demonstrate that the incentives have been dispersed in accordance with its policies and procedures. Key thing to remember, prizes are considered unallowable costs on grants. Another key thing to remember is recognition awards or payments given for the purpose of conferring distinction or to symbolize respect, esteem, or admiration are unallowable. Indirect costs. The amount for indirect costs should be calculated by applying the current negotiated indirect cost rate to the approved base, and such amounts should be specified in the budget justification. Also, please explain any exclusions from your base, i.e. tuition remission, equipment, participant support, or etc. If you, as the grantee, do not have a federally negotiated rate agreement, the de minimis rate of 10% should be used. A question that gets asked, what happens if we get a supplement? The answer is, you are required to use the negotiated F&A rate that is in effect at the time of the initial award throughout the life of the sponsored agreement. Another question that gets asked, what happens when an institution's indirect cost rate changes? Do we have to update it with NSF? The answer is, if the rate changes after the award, NSF will not make the change. Again, policy states you are required to use the negotiated F&A rate that is in effect at the time of the initial award throughout the life of the sponsored agreement. Reporting requirements. Annual reports are due no later than 90 days prior to the end of the current budget period to allow adequate time for the cognizant program officer to review and approve the report. The report becomes overdue the day after the 90-day period ends. Failure to submit timely reports will delay processing of additional funding and administrative actions, including, but not limited to, no-cost extensions. Final project reports are due no later than 120 days following the end of the grant. By submitting the final project report, the PI is signifying that the scope of work for the project has been completed and that he or she does not anticipate that any further research activities, including a no-cost extension, supplemental funding, or transfer of the grant, need to be completed on the project. The report becomes overdue the day after the 120-day period ends. Project outcome reports are due no later than 120 days following the expiration of the grant. These end the project. By submitting the POR, the PI is signifying that the scope of work for the project has been completed and that he or she does not anticipate that any further research activities, again including a no-cost extension, supplemental funding, or transfer of the grant, need to be completed on the project. PIs must submit final technical reports within the time period specified. Failure to provide these reports on a timely basis will delay NSF review and processing of pending proposals for all identified PIs and co-PIs on a given grant. Key thing to remember, I cannot approve your no-cost extension or approve supplemental funding if there is an overdue report pending. No-cost extensions. Grantees may authorize a one-time extension of the end date of the grant of up to 12 months if additional time beyond the established end date is required to assure adequate completion of the original scope of work within the funds already made available. This one-time extension may not be exercised merely for the purpose of using the unliquidated balances. Grantees are not authorized to extend an award that contains a zero balance. For grantee-approved extensions, no amendment will be issued. The revised end date can be viewed via NSF electronic systems. Key things to remember. The first NSF-approved no-cost extension is acknowledged by the NSF program officer. No formal amendment will be issued. The second NSF no-cost extension is reviewed and approved by the program officer and the cognizant grants officer. A formal amendment is issued. Flow-through responsibilities. One source of confusion seems to be about the relationship between the prime grantee, the subawardee, and NSF. Specifically, the prime grantee bears legal responsibility and oversight responsibility, and the subawardee does not have a legal relationship with NSF. There have been cases where the subawardee has contacted me asking questions about their subaward agreement, and I will refer them back to the prime. Questions about the subaward should be directed to the prime grantee institution versus to NSF. Subawards versus contracts. All proposing organizations are required to make a case-by-case determination regarding the role of a subrecipient versus contractor for each agreement it makes. A separate budget and budget justification of no more than 5 pages must be provided for each subrecipient if already identified, along with a description of the work to be performed. It is NSF's expectation that, consistent with the uniform guidance, NSF grantees will use the domestic subrecipient's applicable U.S. federally negotiated indirect cost rate. If no such rate exists, the NSF grantee may either negotiate a rate or will fund the subrecipient using the de minimis indirect cost rate recovery of 10% of all modified total direct costs. NSF monitoring activities. I'm not going to go into detail about each type of monitoring activity, but I can provide some information about the DIAS Advanced Monitoring Program site visits in conjunction with DGA. DIAS and DGA provide on-site or virtual business assistance. This is not considered an audit. Site visits allow CAR to assess awardees' capability, performance, and compliance against the applicable elements that make up each award. This may include administrative regulations and public policy requirements, as well as special and general terms and conditions, including those contained in the NSF program announcement or solicitation, grant or cooperative agreement, as well as the award letter. Pathways to success. Again, a key thing to remember is that if you have any technical or scientific questions, please contact your NSF program officer. If you have any questions regarding administrative or budgetary issues, contact your sponsored research office. I repeat, if you have any questions regarding administrative or budgetary issues, please contact your sponsored research office. Ask early, ask often. If for any reason you need to contact one of us in DGA, a key thing to remember is to include the award number in your email or voicemail to assist us with responding to your inquiry. Resources. I have provided a list of resources that are available to you through nsf.gov. The new PAPG NSF 22-1 affects proposals submitted or due on or after October 4th of this year.